Sponsor support enables Commerce Lexington to keep our members informed about important policy issues. WealthSouth is our presenting sponsor for the Policy Luncheon Series this year. WealthSouth has been a great corporate partner to us and is very involved in many other community efforts as well. We're very pleased to have them as they have stepped up into this presenting role. Now I'd like to have Jeff Zinger, Senior Vice President for WealthSouth, to the podium to present sponsor remarks. Jeff.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Commerce Lexington's Public Policy Luncheon presented by WealthSouth. As Bob said, my name is Jeff Zinger and I'm the Senior Vice President with WealthSouth. We're a division of Farmers National Bank at Danville, and we are a full-service financial services company located in downtown Lexington, offering wealth management, trust, institutional, and private banking services, equine lending, and commercial banking. WealthSouth is proud to partner with Commerce Lexington to present the Public Policy Luncheon. We're especially excited about the opportunity here for both of the candidates vying for the open seat in Kentucky's 6th Congressional District. I want to thank Dr. Ralph Alvarado and Mr. Zach Dembo for taking time out of their busy schedule to spend some time with us this afternoon. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Brandon Gross here. I am a law partner with the Dickens Law Firm in Lexington. I'm also the chair of the Commerce Lexington Public Policy Council. And so first I'd like to thank everyone in this room for being here today, and to also just say you and being subject matter experts are what make my job easier. And so we are working on right now our DC fly-in. Linda and Andy, they kill me. But for those who want to attend, I think we can still squeeze you in. Yes? Yeah, I think Linda said yes. So if you've not signed up for the DC fly-in in a couple of weeks, that will be coming up. And we are working on right now our federal policy pamphlet. I appreciate everyone who has given Anthony information in your different fields. So I want to thank each one and every one of you for that. Also want to mention, at your table is our public policy sponsorship list. So if you want to look here, and if your name is not on here, I would love to add you in the near future. And so feel free to reach out to Andy and Anthony for those items. And then I've got a little speech here, but it's really a list of things I'm not supposed to say. So I will skip through that list. And then I do want to mention, I believe that today is Bob's last public policy lunch with us. Is that true, Bob? Yes, we'll be done. So I want to get everyone once again, let's give Bob quick a huge round of applause. Without his dedication for the last 2.5 decades to this organization, to Lexington, we would not be where we are today. Looking on the agenda, I think I'm the last speaker before Bob comes back up, so I wanted to make sure that was said today, since this would be his last public policy item. So with that being said, I want to also thank Dr. Ralph Alvarado and Zach Dembo for them coming today. I think this is going to be a great event. I just want to remind everyone that there are both Democrats and Republicans in this room. So let's be very polite and respectful throughout these discussions. Of course, Carla Blanton will be the moderator today, and she is with Carla Blanton Consulting. She's also had the pleasure of being twice chair of Commerce Lexington. And is there anyone else who's done that, Carla? Ray Daniels. So Ray is here. Where's Ray Daniels? And Luther Deaton. So there are a few, but not many, who have done that. So big round of applause to all those who've done double duty. And then I'm going to have our guests come up to the stage with Carla. I've been told I'm supposed to flip a coin on who goes first, Carla. And so
we're going to build a drama.
Yeah, so I've got it. And I'll try not to drop it because I'm not coordinated. So.
Running for public office requires significant commitment, and we appreciate your participation today and your willingness to engage with the business community on issues that matter to the greater Lexington region. Today's forum is designed to be a policies discussion, and our goal is to provide our members with an opportunity to get to know you both and hear your views on federal issues that impact our region's economy, workforce, infrastructure, and overall competitiveness. Before we begin, I'd like to briefly review the format. We will start with a coin toss to determine which candidate will deliver opening remarks first. Each candidate will have 5 minutes, and we've got a clock right there, so you'll be able to keep track. Following the opening statement, I will ask 8 policy questions that are based on Commerce Lexington's federal priority issues. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to each question. There will be no follow-up questions, rebuttals, or exchanges between the candidates. That will allow each person an equal opportunity to present his views. At the conclusion of the question, each candidate will have 2 minutes for closing remarks. The candidate who speaks second in the opening statements will speak first in the closing remarks. Finally, I'd ask both candidates to keep their responses focused on policy solutions. And thank you both for participating. Let's get started with the coin toss.
Well, who's going to call it?
You call it.
You call it.
Do I just say,
Heads, Ralph Alvarado, tails.
okay, there we go, that makes it easier, yes, okay. And instead of tossing, I'm just going to kind of juggle it. A little bit. And then I'm going to close my eyes, and I'm going to do this. That way I don't lose it. Heads it is.
All right.
Heads, yes.
Okay.
And then I guess, Zach, you can have the quarter.
I expect
We're recording that.
I expect to make sure later on.
Ralph.
Sure. So first of all, so good afternoon and thank you all. Thanks to Commerce Lexington for hosting today's Public Policy Luncheon, for bringing together the business community leaders who care very deeply about Kentucky and our 6th Congressional District. I also want to acknowledge my opponent for being here as well. Forums like this really matter because they give voters a chance really to compare not just words, but also experience, judgment, and vision. Again, I'm Dr. Ralph Alvarado. Many of you have already known me. I'm a former Kentucky State Senator, Commissioner of Health. I've been a practicing physician for over 30 years, Christian, married to my great wife, Dawn, for 32 years. I'm a father of 2 and now a grandfather of 1 that I'm very proud of. And I'm running for Congress because I believe really Kentucky stands at an important crossroads. An opportunity to choose whether we continue strengthening the foundation of economic growth and opportunity, or whether we drift towards policies that make it hard for people to create jobs to do so. I want to be very clear today. I'm the proven pro-business candidate in this race. Not in theory, not in talking points, but in results. And I've spent my career working alongside the business community, understanding what it takes to grow a company, to balance a budget, meet payroll, take risks in a competitive economy. And I'm the only candidate in this race who's actually worked in and around business decision making in a way that directly connects policy to real world outcomes. And that matters because when you go to Washington, you don't get a learning curve. You're expected to deliver from day one. And Kentucky can't afford a representative who has to figure out how the economy works once they arrive in Congress. We need someone who already knows. In the Kentucky State Senate, I've consistently supported policies that strengthen our economic climate, reducing taxes, reducing unnecessary regulations, ensuring that Kentucky remains competitive for investment, job creation, and innovation as well. And I've also been a very strong advocate for tort reform because a fair and predictable legal system is not an abstract policy idea. It's a deciding factor in whether a business either stays in our state or leaves, and we've seen plenty of examples of that. These aren't just ideological positions for me. They're practical commitments to the people who create jobs and opportunities in our communities. And that commitment is why I've been honored with the endorsement of the United States Chamber of Commerce. And I'm also a 5-time recipient of the Kentucky Chamber MVP Going to Bat for Business Award that was awarded by our own state chamber here during my time in the state Senate. Those recognitions reflect something very simple, that when business leaders needed someone to stand with them on issues that matter, like taxes, regulation, competitiveness, and fairness, I showed up and I delivered. And I intend to do exactly that in Congress as well. But economic leadership is not only about supporting business, it's also about building a society where opportunity is real and it's reachable for everyone. One of the most meaningful roles that I did during my time in the state Senate was I was the chair of the Substance Use Recovery Task Force. In that work, we focused on more than just policy, we focused on people. And we've worked to reduce stigma, to expand recovery pathways, create second chance opportunities so that individuals could return to work, support their families, and rebuild their lives. Because a strong economy is not just measured by GDP, it's measured by whether people have a path back when life knocks you down. That's the kind of balanced leadership I believe Kentuckians are looking for. Strong support for business and growth, paired with a belief in dignity, work, and in second chances. Today, however, we face a broader national debate about direction. It's a choice between more freedom or more government control, between more opportunity for entrepreneurs or more barriers that are placed in their path, between a system that celebrates individual success and one that too often questions it or diminishes it or even vilifies it, between policies that trust people to make decisions and policies that concentrate more decision-making in Washington. I think Kentucky's answer should be clear. We should choose freedom over control, opportunity over restriction, growth over stagnation, and we should never apologize for believing in the power of individuals to build something, to hire others, and to lift up their communities through their own success. That's the spirit of Lexington, that's the spirit of Kentucky, and that's the spirit that I want to take to Congress as well. So when you look at this race, or you look at me and my campaign, I hope that you see more than just a campaign. I hope you see a proven record of working with businesses, a consistent commitment to competitiveness, and a readiness to step into the job on day one without really missing a beat. Because that is what this moment requires. Not experimentation, not learning curves, but experience, stability, and a steady hand that understands how jobs are created and how economies grow. I'm ready to be that voice for us in Kentucky and Congress. Thank you again to Commerce Lexington for the invitation, for your leadership, and for the work that you do every day. Thank you to all of you who provide the jobs and the vision for this state. I want to do everything I can to help strengthen our business community, and I look forward to the discussion ahead. Thank you.
Reset the clock and then.
Okay, I did get the mic on, right? Good. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm very grateful to be here. I really admire the work that Commerce Lex does. I got to visit with Bob briefly in January, and then he announced his retirement in February. When I saw him today, he assured me that was a coincidence. But, you know, he told me about the amazing work you all are doing, especially from the perspective of a regional cooperation, which I think is so crucial in this time. You know, there's a very heavy overlap between the counties that Commerce Lex has begun working with, creating this unprecedented regional cooperation, and the 6th District. And so this is very much a partnership that I intend to continue, and that's why I specifically have reached out to Bob to sit down, and I'm so glad to be here today. I have never run for office before, and so I always like to make sure you all have a sense of where I'm coming from and my values. I am a proud son of Lexington. I am lucky to have grown up here. My mother worked on a dairy and tobacco farm starting at age 5 that her family owned in rural Kentucky. Along the way, she met my father, a New Yorker, who she convinced to move down to Kentucky. They now are both retired and living in Garrett County, but they spent their whole careers as physicians here in town, my father teaching at the University of Kentucky and my mother practicing medicine. I was very lucky that they valued education, which is one reason why I will always be a steadfast supporter of students, teachers, and better outcomes for students in everything that I do. Because they valued education, I was lucky to get a great education. I got to go to Stanford for undergrad and Michigan for law school. But because I knew I was lucky to have that opportunity, and a lot of my mom's side of the family and my dad's side of the family didn't have that opportunity, I wanted to pay that good fortune forward. So my entire career has been spent in public service. The first job I got out of Stanford was teaching 8th grade English in rural Mississippi in the Mississippi Delta. Not a huge Stanford to Mississippi pipeline. Got a lot of weird looks from a lot of my colleagues who were going into tech, which was booming at the time and making much, much more money than I ever did. But I did that because, again, education is so important to me, and being in rural Mississippi really taught me the everyday lives of these students who are doing amazing work under difficult circumstances in a place that had been forgotten by the government. And that showed me that things like poverty, things like lack of development, things like educational failure is a policy choice that our government is making, and it was one I vowed I would never make if I were ever lucky enough to participate. After law school, I joined the Navy. I was on active duty in the Navy as a JAG. Again, loved fighting for the sailors and Marines that I got to represent, and it just drove home how important and special our nation's armed forces are, and again, that they deserve advocates just like the rest of us. I came back home when someone named Andy Bashir got elected, I was lucky enough to be his policy advisor and legislative director. I learned a lot on Team Kentucky, working for the governor, working with folks like Rocky and Jacqueline and Jim Gray and others. And I think the thing they taught me the most was how to govern effectively. Not just winning elections, but making sure that you were governing effectively. The only reason I left the governor's employ was to take what I thought was the last job I'd ever need, as a federal prosecutor here in my hometown of Lexington. There I prosecuted federal felonies over the entire eastern half of the state. I loved standing up for victims of crime. I loved making sure that justice was served, which sometimes meant hefty sentences and a conviction, and other times it meant dismissing a case. But no matter what I loved was, my job was to do the right thing every day. When this administration came in, and in my view changed the mission of the Department of Justice to enable corruption instead of prosecute corruption, when they changed long-standing political norms to be the president's personal law firm, my principles didn't allow me to stay on for that. And while it was very, very hard for my wife and I to talk about it and for me to walk away from 11 years of federal service, ultimately that's what my conscience said I needed to do. So that's what I did, and the question became, how do I keep fighting for Kentuckians like I did for my students, like I did for sailors and Marines, and like I did for victims of crime? That's why I got in this race. Central Kentucky deserves an independent voice, no matter who's in the White House. Central Kentucky deserves someone standing up for us, not to be a rubber stamp administration. And Central Kentucky, most of all, deserves a fighter to bring common sense back to DC. Because let me tell you all, there are a lot of problems in DC, but I think the biggest problem in Congress is they think their job is to get reelected and die in office, and I think their job should be to serve us. So that's my goal. That's why I'd be honored to have your support, and I'm very grateful to be with you all here today.
First question is to you.
Hold on. Okay, should be on that.
Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay. Our first question has to do with regional competitiveness, and Zach, we'll start with you. Just a reminder, 2 minutes for each answer. Commerce Lexington's federal priorities are focused on advocating for policies and critical investments to help strengthen the economic competitiveness of our 9-county region. If elected, what would be your top 3 priorities for increasing jobs and workforce in Kentucky's 6th District? And how would you measure success by the end of your first term?
So, one of the easiest ways to describe my priority is just for Congress to do its job. I don't think that's happened for a long time. For some of those reasons I talked about. So, for example, I don't know what world my opponent's talking about where he claims our current policy under the administration is less government intrusion, but these tariffs that the administration has been permitted to do by Congress are a great example of things that are hurting local industries like bourbon, like Toyota that just posted a 19% loss in profits. It's hurting these industries, and it's also costing all of us an estimate by a nonprofit tax foundation, $1,000 extra that's being passed on to us. Courts have said time and again these are illegal, but Congress is still allowing them to happen, even though if you look at Article 1, Section 8, it clearly says tariffs are the role of Congress. That's something Congress needs to be doing and stepping in instead of being a rubber stamp. That would be priority 1. Priority 2 for me is making sure, as we're building a workforce, that they have access to healthcare and education that both attracts and retains high-quality workers. These cuts that are proposed to Medicaid that could kick 200,000 Kentuckians off Medicaid that are at risk of shuttering 35 rural hospitals, 6 right here in the district, are a real concern of mine. That's something that's going to make people sicker. It's going to cause problems, not just in terms of access to health care, but as many of y'all know, in rural counties, sometimes these hospitals are the second biggest employer after the school board. So there's lots of jobs that I'm worried about too. Finally, overarching all of this is the issue of corruption. There is a massive amount of corruption going on in DC, some from the administration, some from career politicians in Congress. As a former corruption prosecutor, I think we have to clean that up. All of that is stuff Congress should have been doing and hasn't. That's what I want to do if I'm in Congress.
Thank you. Ralph?
Thank you. So, I'm on. Good. So I think first thing we have to kind of understand is the baseline. Is understand where prosperity really comes from. Government doesn't create prosperity. I think it creates the conditions for entrepreneurs, innovators, and workers create prosperity. And so I think my job in Congress would be to make sure that Washington is helping Kentucky compete, not holding Kentucky back. All of you are the creators of prosperity. So the first three things I think we've got to do is make sure that this 6th district is the best place in America to start, grow, or expand a business is the bottom line. You know, one of the things I took a lot of pride in during my time in the legislature, and I think there's legislators here who voted for it too, was to reduce unnecessary regulations. And so I think advancing things like meaningful tort reform, producing the certainty that businesses need to invest with confidence. And so right now that if you have those regulations, the one question you should be asking is, does this help Kentucky compete, or does it make it a harder place to create jobs? The second thing is grow our workforce. I think, the biggest challenge I hear from employers is not that they don't have enough customers, it's finding workers to work for the workplace. And so we need stronger partnerships between our employers, between our universities, community colleges, apprenticeship programs, making sure that we're training the next generation for the future. And we also need to continue to create those second chance opportunities that I mentioned earlier as well. I think those are very important. That's good for families, that's good for the economy. Third is we have to win the competition for investment. So that means modern infrastructure development. So government should create, again, reliable and affordable energy, expand broadband, make sure that we have strong supply chains that we can rely on, be predictable, policies that encourage manufacturers and entrepreneurs to choose Central Kentucky over any other place in the rest of the country. And again, I'm not asking this business community to trust what I say, I'm asking you to judge me based on what I've already done. I voted to reduce taxes, to reduce regulations. I've been a champion for tort reform. I'm the only candidate in this race who's operated a business, understands firsthand what it takes to meet a payroll and manage risk. How will I measure success? I mean, yet pretty simple. More people working, more businesses expanding, more capital investment, higher wages, more entrepreneurs choosing this region to build their future here. I believe the goal isn't simply to grow government, it's to grow opportunity.
Thank you. Ralph, you touched on energy a little bit, and our next question has to do with energy, AI, and economic competitiveness. Really easy topics. So what are your thoughts on AI and data centers? They generated a lot of headlines, controversy, misinformation. What role does Congress play in navigating this new technology and infrastructure?
Yeah, so energy policy is economic policy, and it's increasingly, I think, a national security policy as well. So for decades, one of our greatest competitive advantages here has been affordable, reliable electricity. That's why Toyota even came to Kentucky in the first place, was those rates. Why a lot of manufacturers are still looking at Kentucky and coming to our region is for those rates. So if we want to compete for the next generation of investments, we have to make sure that we protect that advantage moving forward. As electricity demands grow because of advanced manufacturing, because of AI, data centers, I think Congress's role needs to be to make sure that we have an all-of-the-above energy policy for the country moving forward. And that means expanding reliable generation, modernizing our infrastructure that we have right now for transmission, reforming our permitting process. You can't get new energy projects up because of how difficult it's become. And I think reliable and affordable energy is essential if we want to continue to be economically competitive. Now, AI represents, I think, one of our greatest opportunities and one of our greatest strategic, challenges of our time. Whoever leads in AI is going to be going to have a significant military advantage and economic advantage moving forward. In the United States, I tell you, it has to lead in this. We cannot let the Chinese get ahead of us on this. So we should encourage innovation, strengthen cybersecurity, protect intellectual property, ensure that America has the infrastructure needed to remain the world's technology leader. But here's where I draw an important line, I think, also. So while the federal government should create the conditions for innovation, it should not dictate where data centers are built. Whether a community wants to host a data center or not should be up to their local leaders, their local citizens, and not to Washington bureaucrats. And if a community decides to welcome a data center, I think it's also important that we protect families and businesses from increased rates in their water and in their power. That burden should be placed on the data centers themselves and not on the ratepayers. That's the balance that I believe in. I think it's American technological leadership, Kentucky economic competitiveness, local control, and protecting taxpayers and ratepayers. If we get those four things right, I think we're going to create jobs, strengthen our economy, and make sure that America remains the world's leader in innovation without sacrificing the interests of the communities that we serve.
Zach?
Undoubtedly, and it's become a trope at this point, but AI is going to be the most transformative thing, and already is the most transformative thing for the next decade. And that's something that government and everyone in this room needs to be ready to address, and address in a smart way. I'll tell you, I'm not pleased with how Congress has been handling AI regulation, because I feel like we're falling into the same trap we did when it came to cybersecurity. As a veteran, obviously national defense is always going to be top of mind for me. I felt that the way that they handled cybersecurity was often too reactive, too whack-a-mole, and I fear that the same thing is happening when it comes to AI regulation. There are ways in which AI can be a massive boon, obviously. It can help cure cancer, it can help us find new drugs, and it can be a huge help as we're having a strong national defense. But at the same time, if we're over-regulating any of this, there is a concern that places that don't have any concern about that, such as China, Russia, and other adversaries, are going to take full advantage of it. And right now, I don't feel that there's a coherent strategy coming out of Congress. And part of the problem is Congress is really old and they don't understand AI. I mean, when I got in this race, one of the few pieces of good news is that 40 is considered young. I didn't feel particularly young looking in the mirror at 40, and I still don't think it's that young compared to truly young people, but so many people said that's so young for politics. I think that's a sad commentary on this number of people who are running and the people who are addressing these issues, because some of these people don't even understand email, y'all. I don't know how they're going to turn around and learn about large language models. We have got to have credible, thoughtful instruction when it comes to AI and national security. That's something that I'd really like to head up as a veteran if elected to Congress.
Now we're moving on to economic policies for taxes and regulations. Zach, you touched on tariffs, but businesses across industry sectors are navigating persistent inflation, rising operating costs, and tax and regulatory uncertainty. What specific federal tax, regulatory, or economic policies would you support to reduce these pressures while maintaining fiscal responsibility and creating a more predictable environment for business investment and job creation?
I want to hit on two words that were in that question. The first is uncertainty. I'm fortunate to have had a wonderful career of public service, but there is a lot of knowledge in this room that I don't have, and frankly, I'd love to have. So the first thing that I'll promise everyone in this room, whether or not you donate, vote, are my party an independent, God forbid, don't vote, please everyone in the room vote, is that I'll always be willing to listen and learn, because I recognize there's a lot I need to learn. And while I've been going around to Central Kentucky businesses, that word uncertainty just keeps coming up again and again. And I've heard from businesses, for example, who've ordered things, they're good Kentucky businesses, they ordered an important part from abroad, and literally the tariffs changed while it was en route, and the material ended up costing double what it would have cost before, such that they actually refused the shipment because the tariff made it that they were going to lose money just for accepting these goods. This uncertainty, where trade policy is done based on tweets and tantrums, instead of any sort of responsible thought of how to protect American industry while ensure that we're living up to the free market ideals that the United States helped create, it's got to end. And Congress has got to be the check there, because I talk to so many business owners, even if they have a 3-month project, forget a large-scale capital investment, which, by the way, I hear just is a nightmare these days when you don't know what the cost of raw materials will be, what's going to happen to your labor force, and finished materials. Businesses need predictability. They need someone to be a check on an out-of-control administration. And let me add, if the next administration comes in and messes around with tariffs or trade policy, I'd be just as strong a check no matter who the party is. That's a real concern of mine. The other part she brought up is fiscal responsibility. Both parties these days are spending like drunken sailors, and as a Navy guy, I'm allowed to say that. No one is thinking about what we're passing on to our grandchildren as the deficit and debt grow. I want to.
So one of the things that I've learned as a physician and a business owner is that uncertainty is very expensive. I think we all know that. You can plan for challenges in business, but when you struggle with not knowing what Washington or Frankfurt sometimes is going to do, that's what the uncertainty kind of leads to things. So whether it's taxes, regulations, energy policy, inflation, business need confidence that they can invest in today, that the rules won't change tomorrow. We want to make sure they can do that. So the first thing we have to do is restore that certainty to our economy. So I'm very glad that the 2017 tax reforms became permanent in this country, that we can now, employers can make long-term investment decisions with confidence instead of wondering whether they're facing a massive tax increase every few years. Second, we have to take a hard look also at the federal regulatory process. I believe, again, in smart regulations that protect health, safety, and the environment. In my previous role as Commissioner of Health, I oversaw 3,000 employees, a $1.1 billion budget, but one of the first tasks that I did was to reduce regulations by 15% in my department to create a better environment for people to practice medical care. So too often I think Washington measures how many rules they have as their measure of success, not often on the quality of those rules or what they're trying to accomplish. We've still got rules that are still back from the 1980s that haven't been touched. and we've got to modernize that structure in Washington. So every new regulation should be judged on one standard. Does the benefit justify the cost to the people that are creating the jobs? The next thing also is you have to get serious about fiscal responsibility, clearly. We cannot continue spending money that we don't have. Everybody in this room knows that you can't operate your business that way. You can't continue to spend beyond your means forever. And I think Congress should remember something that's easy to forget in Washington, that businesses aren't really asking government to guarantee success. What they're asking for is just a level playing field and predictable rules and the freedom to compete. That's exactly the philosophy that I brought to the Kentucky State Senate. It's a reason why I was recognized by the U.S. Chamber and that I'm planning to do when I get to Congress. My goal isn't to make it bigger, make Congress bigger. It would be to make American businesses and Kentucky businesses the most competitive in the world, and that's what we're hoping to get accomplished.
Thank you. Now on to a related subject of trade and global competitiveness. Central Kentucky's economy depends on exports in industries such as advanced manufacturing, agricultural, bourbon, equine, and automotive production. At the same time, businesses have expressed concerns about the impact of tariffs on supply chains and production costs. Ralph, how should Congress balance protecting American industries while maintaining access to global markets that are critical to Kentucky's economy?
Yeah, so Kentucky's always been a state that makes things and sells them to the rest of the world, right? Whether it's bourbon, agricultural products, automobiles, aerospace components, what have you. Our workers can compete basically with anybody, provided the playing field is very, very fair. I don't think we have to choose between protecting American industries and expanding international trade. We can and we have to do both. So first we need to recognize that China is not just simply another trading partner that we have out there. They are our greatest economic and geopolitical competitor. And Congress should continue to push back against unfair trade practices, intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers, and supply chain dependence that threatens America's economy and also our national security. And second, while tariffs can be an important tool, they should be used strategically, not as an end in themselves. We have to be mindful of the impact that tariffs can have on our manufacturers, farmers, distillers, and other Kentucky exporters that rely on global supply chains as well. The goal should always be to change unfair behavior and strengthen America's position, not to create unintended consequences on our own businesses moving forward. And I think Congress should also be opening new markets for Kentucky products. When someone in another country buys a bottle of Kentucky bourbon or drives a Camry that's built in Georgetown, or purchases products made by Kentucky manufacturers, that's not just good for business, but it's also good for the American workers. We should be negotiating trade agreements that lower barriers for our exporters and insist on fair treatment for American companies moving forward as well. At the end of the day, I want Kentucky businesses competing based on the quality of our products here, not because they're being held back by unfair foreign competition or unnecessary barriers here at home. My philosophy is pretty simple. You want to buy American whenever you can, build more in America whenever possible, and sell Kentucky products everywhere in the world. That's how we strengthen our economy, create better paying jobs, and ensure the next generation of economic growth happens right here in our region.
Zach?
I'm surprised to hear my opponents say that tariffs shouldn't be an end of themselves, because that's certainly the position of this administration and their enablers in the congressional party that he's seeking to join. There have been so many shifts in the tariffs that seem to have no rhyme or reason, and they're certainly not America first. Some of y'all, as I said, my mom comes from a long line of farmers, used to be dairy cattle, some beef cattle. You all probably know the state east of the Mississippi that raises the most beef cattle is Kentucky. And it's been tough for beef farmers. While we, by the way, are all paying more for beef, it's not like they were really doing great beforehand. And so when this administration both crushes their ability to make a living through tariffs and also through driving up the prices of equipment and diesel, through this senseless war in Iran, which we haven't even gotten to, but obviously that's something that's been a huge impact on all of our lives economically, and at the same time turns around and buys $700 billion worth of cheap Argentine beef, simply because the president and the president of Argentina are friends. That's not America first, and I don't know how you can see that as anything other than an anti-farmer, anti-American industry position. And so I would never be for it. I can't tell from my opponent's position if he's saying he would be for it or not. I think we all need to ask these questions because, look, Congress has been asleep at the wheel while decisions like that are hurting Kentucky farmers, that are hurting Kentucky industries. You all remember when Canada just stopped buying Kentucky bourbon. I mean, that was disastrous and something no one could have predicted. If we truly are going to have a hands-off, predictable, America-first strategy, Congress has got to oppose this administration's reckless trade positions that are doing nothing but hurting consumers, Kentucky industries, and Kentucky farmers.
We're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about transportation and infrastructure. The region's central location is a competitive advantage for economic development. Commerce Lexington has been a longtime advocate for continued federal transportation infrastructure for roads, bridges, rail, and particularly the Bluegrass Airport, including the relocation of the air traffic control tower to support future terminal expansion. Zach, what infrastructure projects would you prioritize for the 6th District, and how would you work to secure federal investments for those priorities?
Infrastructure, I was just talking to Rob about this. Infrastructure is, I think, an amazing ability for Congress to work together in a bipartisan fashion. And I really think, when done best, it really should be bipartisan, or my preference, nonpartisan. I was lucky to sit down with Eric Frankel at the Bluegrass Airport, and twice now he's been able to brief me on the expansion project for the airport, which I couldn't be more excited about. You all probably saw last year they had a record 1.6 million visitors, which was on top of another record the year before. Having an airport that's modern and effective is crucial to this region's growth. And as they highlighted for me, it's not just about Lexington, as you all probably know. Many of the outlying counties rely on Lexington for travel. And that's what's important for tourism, for manufacturing, for companies coming in. We need that, and so I was pleased to see that as a result of bipartisan work, they got the initial amount of funding. I'm committing to help to make sure they have what they need to move the air traffic control tower. But I think that's just one example of so many things. You know, working with Jim Gray in the governor's administration, I was lucky to see how much can be done in a bipartisan fashion, like when the governor worked with Governor DeWine of Ohio and made the Brent Spence Bridge reopen very quickly without tolls. I think that was a huge coup. I thought it was great that we were able to have now effectively the dream of a 4-lane highway from Paducah to Pikeville with the expansion of the Mountain Parkway and others. Those are all things that Congress absolutely can and should be doing. I don't think, as a federal prosecutor, I often had to decide, is this within the federal interest to do something? And the answer often was no. I think it's the same question for Congress. There are limited things that Congress should be involved in. This is something they can and can do well. And that's something that I very much want to champion if I'm lucky enough to be y'all's congressman.
So infrastructure isn't just about getting roads and bridges, as we know. It's about really economic competitiveness for the region, making sure that we've got good business investments that want to come here. They base their decisions to locate in our area because of whether or not they can get their product out quickly to the rest of the country, the rest of the world, whether or not employees can get to work quickly or not, and whether a region has the infrastructure needed for future growth as well. I think it's very important that we have a good long-term plan. We've got a tremendous location advantage because of our location, that we're centrally located right now in the country, but we can't really take that advantage for granted. One of the things we've got to do is continue to invest into our interstates, into a lot of our road projects. Those are always very, very important, make sure that we maintain our freight corridors for a lot of our manufacturers here to make sure they can get their products out quickly. Bluegrass Airport, this is my opponents talked about. That's something that I was able to meet with them during my time in the state senate. We have other airports within our district as well. In Madison County, we have them also in Montgomery County. During my time, I was able to get funding for those airports to make sure they continue to expand and produce, have enough economic opportunity for their communities as well. The Bluegrass Airport, obviously, with the new tower is going to be required for expanding the terminals now to accommodate bigger passenger jets and allow more cargo to come in here, more international flights hopefully as well, that people can come and look at our region. The third thing is rail connectivity. RJ Foreman's a big employer for us as well in Chesterfield County. Had a chance to meet with them for logistics. We rely quite a bit on rail for a lot of our manufacturers to get things out there. This is an area, I think, where my expertise also and experience also matters. During my time in the Senate, I served in the Senate Transportation Committee. I worked closely with District 7, the Transportation Cabinet. I built a lot of strong working relationships. Many of those legislators are here today, but the vast majority of the legislators in our district have endorsed me for this campaign. So I've got working relationships with them. And when I'm in Congress, I'm hoping to have that same collaborative approach with Washington to work with our local governments, business communities, legislators, local officials to strengthen our economy, improve our quality of life. Again, ultimately, infrastructure is an investment in our opportunity for our community. The more that we have, the more vision we have, the better we'll do.
Thank you. Our next topic is workforce and immigration. Employers across the region continue to face workforce challenges. To help address those needs, Commerce Lexington supports immigration reform, that both strengthens border security and modernizes legal immigration pathways. Ralph, what immigration reforms would you support to meet workforce needs?
Yeah, as the son of legal immigrants, this issue is kind of personal for me. My parents both came to this country legally because they believed in the American dream and they respected the rule of law. And I think that we can both be both a nation of immigrants and also a nation of laws. And those two principles are not in conflict, they actually depend on one another. And I would argue that most immigrants actually come to this country because we are a land of law and order, unlike most places in the world. But under the previous presidential administration, we know that that was a complete disaster in this country. We saw millions of people pour into this country and create the problems that we're still paying for today. The first responsibility of the federal government is to secure the border and restore confidence in our immigration system. You can't have an immigration system where people who follow the law are put behind those who don't follow the law. And anyone who's in this country illegally and commits a crime should be removed. I'm sorry. Protecting our communities has to come first. But securing the border alone doesn't solve our workforce challenges, like you've mentioned. I hear every day from Kentucky farmers and from employers, construction companies, restaurants, hotels, they simply cannot find enough workers. And our economy depends on legal immigration, and our immigration laws should reflect our economic realities as well. And that's why I would support expanding and modernizing legal work visa programs like H-2A and H-2B, so that employers who have legitimate workforce needs can hire workers legally when qualified Americans aren't available. These programs are essential really to our agricultural industry, to the horse farms here, hospitality, landscape, construction. And finally, our legal immigration system should become more merit-based, I think. This country used to have its immigration based on that. America should continue welcoming talented people who want to contribute, innovate, start businesses, and strengthen our economy. And that's the balanced approach that I would support, is to secure the border, enforce the law, modernize our legal immigration, meet the workforce needs of Kentucky employers, and preserve the American dream for those who want to follow the rules.
Zach?
This is another great example of Congress being broken. The immigration system itself has been broken for a very, very long time. And this is something that Congress needs to get together and fix. I'm new to this, so I guess I'm only supposed to knock the current administration, but I'll knock both this and the previous administration. The previous administration, their approach to border security at the southern border, I thought was ridiculous as a veteran and as a prosecutor. I'll tell you, this administration's approach to immigration is both ridiculous, inhumane, and unconstitutional. As a federal prosecutor, and the only person on this stage who has prosecuted people here illegally who committed serious crimes, I know how important it is that we're targeting criminals who are here illegally, because I did that. But when you look at the statistics, some 70% of the folks who are currently being detained by ICE have no criminal record at all. And the other thing that worries me, as we are obsessed with getting these stats up to keep Stephen Miller happy, is that we're forgetting all the other things these agencies should be focusing on, like what I used to do, which is prosecuting crime and investigating the many other things that are going on. There absolutely needs to be a secure southern border, and we need to be enforcing this against people who are here who are dangerous. But for folks who are law-abiding, who have been the cornerstones of the horse industry, of the bourbon industry, of the ag industry, the tobacco industry, which my family used to be a part of before the buyout, they deserve a pathway to citizenship. They are already fulfilling the American dream we've been asking of them, and the fact that Congress has not gotten that done, I think, is malfeasance at best. We need a Congress that will stand up with new ideas about this, and they will stand up to this administration when they're committing these unconstitutional searches of people's homes without warrants, and to the last administration where they were ignoring the southern border. That's what Congress should be doing. That's why Article 1 is the first one the founders put in as the most powerful branch of government. That's what we need to reclaim.
Thank you. Our next priority focuses on housing and community development. Increasing housing availability and affordability is one of the biggest economic development challenges facing central Kentucky. Commerce Lexington has advocated for federal policies such as the recently passed 21st Century Road to Housing Act, strengthening the low-income housing tax credit, preserving home and community development block grant funding, and supporting innovative public-private housing partnerships like the Transylvania Transformational Housing Project. Zach, what role should the federal government play in helping communities increase housing supply and ensuring housing remains attainable for working families?
This is another great example of Congress having the ability to dream big and think big. I'm pleased that they passed the 21st Century Road to Housing bill. I would have been a vote in favor of that. The fact that that's being held hostage for political reasons on the president's desk, I think is unconscionable, although I don't mind being able to campaign on it, because certainly it's something that's going to be able to help people get affordable housing, and it needs to be signed and put into law, but it's just the first step. I'm lucky that I was able to afford a home only because I qualified for a VA loan. With my wife and I both being public servants, we couldn't have had a house without that VA loan. And we need to expand programs like that for first-time home buyers, for veterans, for first responders, for teachers. We need to make it easier because let me tell you, for folks my age and younger, increasingly the American dream, which involves home ownership, is seen as out of grasp. And that's something that is an emergency that Congress needs to be dealing with today. I think expanding the low-income tax housing credit is a great idea, but I think we can think bigger. HUD, for example, used to do research about ways to bring down the costs of building materials, which have been essentially the same for a long time. And HUD hasn't been doing that, and as you all may know, HUD has been the subject of massive cuts, so I don't think they're going to be doing it anytime soon. Things like that, being able to put forward the research funding to solve these problems in a big way, as opposed to putting more red tape, is where Congress, I think, can really add value to this discussion. I will say, I think it's too hard to build in America right now. I think there are too many regulations. We need to make it easier. That's what I hear when I'm talking to business owners trying to make a difference, trying to have affordable housing. The low-income tax housing credit is far too hard to get. There are ways we can make it easier, and there are ways we can make it cheaper. Congress needs to step up to the plate with this, and first the president needs to sign the 21st Century Road to Housing Act.
Al?
So again, affordability for housing is an economic competition issue. You know, if you have your workers or you have young professionals who can't afford to live in a particular community, it's tough to attract businesses to come here. Our economy slows down. Families have fewer opportunities as a result of that. So the federal government's role, however, should not be to dictate local zoning decisions or create this one-size-fits-all kind of mentality for states. The housing needs in Hawaii are going to be different than Kentucky, than Maine. And so I think instead Washington should be a partner by removing a lot of barriers, encouraging investments, and giving communities the tools to solve their own housing challenges here. Because people here in this group who are doing construction, you know the issues and the needs that are here. That starts with supporting a lot of our proven incentives, things that we already know that work. So things like low-income housing tax credits, home program, and any of our community development block grants that we've been able to do in the past. Those need to be continued. Encourage a lot of public-private partnerships that have already shown promise here in central Kentucky. That's how we fix it here locally. We also have to recognize that housing doesn't stop at the Fayette County line for what we do in Fayette County. This is a regional issue. We need to consider regionalization. If you can, again, improve transportation infrastructure, connectivity between Fayette County, neighboring counties, and everybody throughout the district. Even consider some investments in transit solutions. Might be a way to let people live in other communities, be able to commute in where the jobs are at. And just as importantly, you have to reduce the cost of construction. I mean, inflation, excessive regulations, permit delays, supply chain issues are causing a lot of those problems for a lot of our people that are doing construction. Again, in the Kentucky State Senate, I supported lower taxes, supported reducing unnecessary regulations. I'll work in Congress also to help remove federal barriers that increase construction costs and discourage investment. And again, it should be really simple. Empower the private sector to build more housing, support local solutions instead of federal mandates that come down. And again, we talked about immigration earlier. It makes it tougher on housing when you have a sudden influx of 10 million people into the country that need housing. That became part of the problem we have as well. We've got to be able to work on that right here and for the needs that are important for us here in Kentucky.
Our final question is centered around federal spending investments. Federal research funding and investments in strategic industries and infrastructures are critical economic drivers for central Kentucky. From UK's research enterprise to our defense, aerospace, advanced manufacturing, healthcare, and ag sectors, as well as water, sewer, and job site projects, these partnerships support innovation, commercialization, workforce development, and thousands of jobs. As Congress considers future federal spending priorities, Ralph, how would you balance fiscal responsibility with the need to invest in research, innovation, and strategic industries that strengthen our economy and national competitiveness?
Yeah, so fiscal responsibility and economic competitiveness are not competing priorities, really. They go hand in hand. If we're going to leave our children a stronger America, we have to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars today while making smart investments that will produce good long-term results. I think the good news is that Kentucky has already shown the country what that looks like. Over the past decade, our Commonwealth has transformed itself into one of the most competitive states in America for job creation, business investments, and economic development. I had the privilege of serving in the Kentucky State Senate, again, for 8 of those years, where I voted for many of the policies that made that transformation possible. And again, I'll repeat them over and over again: lowering taxes, reducing unnecessary regulations, investing in workforce development, creating an environment where businesses could grow and create jobs. Many of you advocated for those very policies. And at the time, not everyone supported those decisions. Some even tried to veto some of those decisions. But today, many of those same policies are now being celebrated because the results speak for themselves. And Kentucky's attracting record private investment, expanding manufacturing, creating opportunities that simply did not exist a decade ago. And looking back now, I think Kentuckians are grateful that we stayed the course. And that's the same philosophy I want to bring to Congress. The federal government should focus on strategic investments that have a proven return. Here in Kentucky, that means supporting the University of Kentucky's world-class research enterprise, supporting partnerships in defense and aerospace, agriculture, healthcare, investing in critical infrastructure like, again, our water and sewer and broadband, and job-ready industrial sites that can allow people to come in and bring the private sector to bring investment dollars in. But every federal dollar should be accountable. We should prioritize investments that leverage private capital, strengthen domestic supply chains, enhance our national security, and again, help American businesses compete, especially against countries like China. Innovation doesn't happen because government gets bigger. It happens when entrepreneurs have the confidence to invest because taxes are competitive, regulations are reasonable, energy is affordable, and government is a reliable partner instead of an obstacle. And again, I think the model that Kentucky has laid out there has been a proven model that works. It's a model of fiscal discipline, strategic investment, and private sector growth. And I think that the federal government can learn a thing or two from Kentucky.
One of the many things that makes America great is our research and innovation. And I feel very lucky to have grown up in a place with a great institution like UK, where my mom, who was the first in our family who went to college, went, and my dad spent his whole career. And it won't surprise you all to know, when I talk to folks at UK, there's real concern about these cuts with grants. There's real concern about an administration that would propose cutting the National Institutes of Health budget, the National Cancer Institute's budget, and a concern about a Congress that doesn't seem to be speaking out against it. And even if those cuts don't come in, UK and other higher learning institutions in the region are telling me when they're recruiting, how are they going to be able to recruit someone if they're saying, well, our congressman is not really speaking out against it, and we can't say for sure if this grant funding is going to work out. How's that going to compare to places where they have a full-throated advocate standing up to this administration? When it comes to fiscal responsibility, though, I think that it would be, one of the reasons that the writing was on the wall for me to resign was this DOGE nonsense, right? For all of us in the federal government, it couldn't have been more frustrating because there are absolutely ways to make the federal government more efficient. There are absolutely ways to cut it, but you do it with a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. It's been very clear that what DOGE has done, unfortunately, is just ruin the federal government's ability to help you and me, while at the same time, it's given them the excuse to say, pass these tax cuts that added $3 trillion to the deficit, $4 trillion to the debt. It's allowed them to take this war in Iran, which is estimated to cost $132 billion. And so if we're talking about fiscal responsibility, let's start talking about addressing those issues first before we think about cutting cancer treatments, before we think about cutting important defense research, before we think about cutting things that benefit you and I. That's what Congress should be doing, and that's what we need to be telling folks so that places like UK can continue to be the amazing institutions they are.
Thank you. We are now down to our closing statements. So Zach, 2 minutes for you.
So you may be able to tell from this that this is obviously my first time doing this. I've been very lucky to be in front of a lot of juries. I have not been fortunate enough to do a lot of political speeches. And frankly, that's because I don't like politics, y'all. I really don't. And I would imagine most of you in the room don't either. I wasn't planning on doing this a year ago, but when the ways that I'd chosen to serve my country played out in a way that I didn't think I could stay true to my oath to the Constitution I swore 4 times, this was the path that was created. And so what I can tell you is, I think part of the problem with politics is career politicians. As I was hinting at the beginning, we have people who think their job is to either get reelected or find a higher office that looks better on their resume. That is not why I got into this. I got into this to serve you all, to fight for you all. And as I said, I recognize there's plenty I need to learn from many of the smart people in this room. I've been able to sit down with some of y'all. I'd welcome the opportunity to sit down with any of y'all. Please come up afterwards, I've got cards. But the other thing that I can pledge is, in addition to being a listening ear, I'll be fighting for constituents here in Kentucky. And that doesn't matter if they're my party or a different party. And when it comes to policies, it doesn't matter to me if it's proposed by my party, a different party, or an independent. The sole lens through which I will examine things is, does this benefit the people of Central Kentucky? It's an easy analysis, but shockingly, we see fewer and fewer politicians doing this because they get sucked into the game of politics and decide their job is to stay in office. I can pledge to you, my goal is to continue my service to you all, as I have tried to do as a federal prosecutor, as a Navy veteran, as a teacher, and that's why I would ask for your vote to support November. I'm very grateful again for you all being here, and the only other thing I'd say is, as gross as politics is, I hope you all stay engaged, because it's you all ultimately who I'm asking to be my boss, and so I want to make sure that you all are at the table for every discussion like this, so thank you.
Thank you, Ralph.
So thank you all. As we conclude today, I think I want to thank again Commerce Lexington for putting this together, for hosting this important conversation. I want to thank all of you for investing your time in the Commonwealth, and for all of you for advocating for the state and for the things that you believe in. You've heard us discuss a lot of things: taxes, housing, infrastructure, trade, energy, AI, many challenges that are facing. These are all important issues, but they all come down to a fundamental question. What kind of future do we want to build for Kentucky is what it comes down to. I believe Kentucky's best days are still ahead of us. We've got world-class manufacturers, we have innovative entrepreneurs, outstanding farmers, growing technology, respected universities, but most importantly, really hardworking people who simply want the opportunity to succeed. And so our job in Washington should be to remove obstacles, not to create new ones, and to make it easier for those folks to build businesses, create jobs, raise families in the area. I don't think Washington has all the answers. I believe the best ideas come from the people in this room, and from those who are trying to open businesses and hire workers and invent new technologies. Government should be a partner that creates opportunity, not a barrier that limits it. And throughout my career, many of you know me. I mean, people think I'm not a career politician. I still practice medicine. I still crank out more work reviews than the average physician, even now while I'm doing this. I'm a workaholic. And so I work to bring people together. And many of you that have worked in this room and people that are on my opponent's team know that I've worked with them to bring people together, to solve problems, to deliver results. And I've stood with Kentucky's business community, championed policies that strengthen our economy, fought for families facing some of life's toughest challenges. As a doctor, I help people navigate a very complicated healthcare system. I want to help them navigate a very complicated federal system as well. I want our kids and our grandkids to inherit a Commonwealth where they don't have to leave home to find that opportunity, to be able to do it right here, where businesses can be competitive right here, where the workers have the skills to succeed, where innovation is encouraged and hard work is rewarded, and the American dream is alive and well. That's the future that I believe in. That's the future I'll fight for every day. I'd be honored to earn your trust, your support, and your vote. Pick somebody who's already done it and knows how to get it done, and someone with the experience, not going to have to learn on the fly. Thank you so much, and God bless all of you. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you both for putting yourselves out there running for office, and thank you for proving that a civil and substantive discussion can occur here. Our goal was that you all would leave here more informed voters than when you walked in, and I think that we've accomplished that. So thank you both very much.